Good evening, everybody.
Hello. Good evening.
Hello
How are
there,
you?
sir. I'm all right, sir. How the devil are you?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good. Welcome to 2022 DPiP.
Yes, the very first one. Good grief. Don't seem 5 minutes since the last one, although it probably was a few months ago because I've lost track of what time it is and what month it is. It's confusing, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Yeah, time goes fast. But
so here we are again, once again online. Not quite yet back to coffee shop doing it, but welcome everyone who's been before, and welcome all our new registered DPiP members. And I believe they're from far and wide now. We've truly gone international, which is nice.
So we've got a few in the chat at the moment. If you are in the chat and watching, just say hello. We'll be asking for questions at the end of the talks, but yeah, obviously just say hello in the chat in the meantime.
As the talk goes on, feel free to throw in your questions and we'll post them at the end and get Peter to answer them. For those that don't know what DPiP is, we are a community of digital people, obviously, and we are there to help and support each other and share a bit of knowledge now internationally, which is good. The benefits of being online. Shame we all can't get in the coffee shop. So yeah, if anyone wants to do a talk in the future, like today's Peter's going to, let us know and we'll happily accommodate you. No problem at all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had some good talks over the years, haven't we? So
oh, definitely.
Yeah, such a wide range of topics. So literally anything goes.
How long have we been going? I always forget.
10 years.
10
I think
years
Liz is in the chat and she'll correct us. She's probably screaming at us for getting it wrong.
You know what I'm like with figures. So yeah, roughly 10 years. Right, lovely stuff. Shall we crack on with Peter then? Introduce you to Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And
speak to the devil.
Peter.
Hi.
Hi, Peter.
Popped up from the bottom.
Magic.
little jack in the box.
The wonders of technology.
He's on the move.
We're all moving around.
We should say as well, so big thanks to Dan from Big Orange Heart, who's behind the scenes pressing the buttons for us. Kind of
make sure the show runs smoothly.
Yeah, exactly.
How's your week been so far, Peter?
I think busy. But I understand the dream state you're talking about. I feel like every day is the same as the last one, but I keep thinking it's 2 years ago. Does that make sense?
Yeah. We've kind of missed out some years because of a certain thing going on. So we forget them ones. And
don't mention it.
Yeah, no, we're not going to. We're not going to.
So I love it. Thank you very much for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming along. We shall now hand you over to you then. You may have the stage and we'll introduce your talk, The Rise of Immediate Intelligence, stroke Data in the Fast Lane.
Data in the Fast Lane, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll tell you who I am before I start yakking on. My name is Peter Marshall. I am what's called a senior developer advocate for a company called Imply. Imply is based in Burlingame in California, in Silicon Valley. Hold your breath. I've got about 20 years enterprise experience covering lots of different computer systems, CRM to master data management. And I used to work in Innovation Way in the AB Agri building. If anybody knows where that is, I left there about, my goodness, 3 years ago now. And I was working as a digital architect in their digital and data team in AB Agri and working with the rest of the Associated British Foods group out of Peterborough. And that's what got me interested in joining this group in the first place, actually. And I love that people come together and we can all help each other in a community. And that's kind of a bit of the message of this talk, actually, is how important it is to connect with one another and help one another in IT, especially as you get old and you don't know the new things that everyone else knows. I've got a BA in theology. Please don't ask me any questions about God. Not yet, anyway. And I've TOGAF certified. That does sound like I should be in an institution, I know, but TOGAF certified, just a qualification for architects. I also have a tendency to buy books and then not read them, and also to buy very big televisions that my partner is extremely happy with when I walk down the road randomly with them. For those of you who know Star Trek, the Prime timeline is the real and only proper timeline And I also bought a Peloton earlier this year. Earlier last year, I should say. If you're on Peloton, come and say hello. If you want to ask me any questions at all, contact me, connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. My details are at the bottom of the screen there, petermarshall.io, and also my email address is on there. So what's this talk about? So it's called The Rise of Immediate Intelligence. Really, what I'm going to talk to you about is a particular database that I work with all the time called Apache Druid. And I'm going to try and describe what Apache Druid is, why it's important in a digital environment, where it came from, give a bit of a history lesson on database evolution over the years, and then give you some signposts to go and play with it yourselves if you want to and see how the thing works. So let's start with this weird definition of what immediate intelligence is. And I should say as well, it's not the organizer's fault that the title of this talk has changed. Don't worry, you are in the right place. This is just Peter Marshall changing some details on the slides at the last minute. Okay, so what's immediate intelligence? What I'm going to try and do is describe two different types of analytics that happens in the world. And at the top here, with this very, very tasty bowl of very, very hot Cheetos, the kind of Cheetos that make your fingers go yellow, we're going to talk about the immediate intelligence use cases. Then at the bottom, we've got use cases which are full of black and white government cheese, as you can see there at the bottom left-hand corner. They're like kind of a data warehouse type use cases. Now, in reality, of course, this is a scale. You have some things that are really immediate intelligence, and then you have stuff that's more like your traditional business intelligence. So let's play with this, shall we? At the bottom here, we have everything that we all know and love. The stuff I grew up with when I started in IT a while ago, when everything was about SQL Server. Well, actually, it wasn't. It was about Ingress, I think, at the time, where we've got a group of analysts, people with long hair sitting there, don't really talk to anybody. We've got analysts who are sitting there, and they're writing these sets of queries to look at data in databases. They're pretty predictable. In fact, most of the time, that team will spend hours and hours trying to work with the business to write report specifications and shake it out of them. But they kind of know the entity relationship diagram inside and out. They know what it's going to take to construct a query. And that query that you run might take a while. It might take a day. It might take minutes. It might take hours. But eventually what you end up with is this really carefully well-crafted query, and you run it on your database. And at the end, you end up with this really lovely curated data set where loads of people can reflect on that very accurate and very reliable data. Awesome. I grew up with that. That was lovely. I feel comfortable with that. But this new world, which I'm going to try and introduce you to, is a bit different to that. It's about instinctive decision making, and it's about exploration of the data. So we have applications that people like Yahoo and DBS Bank and British Telecom are giving to employees, even to customers directly, and they all have a sense of immediacy to them. So in those applications, they've got critical data available immediately. Things that have happened just in the last few seconds, sometimes even the last few milliseconds. So their decisions that they take in those applications have a sense of immediacy as well. So there you can use this application to make really informed decisions about what to do next extremely quickly, whether that's to take an actual immediate action, a compensation or some kind of handling or some decision they need to go and speak to someone about, or whether they need to go and do more research by talking to the people in blue. And they are used to democratize that data, to gain immediate access to the data. And once those applications are in place, as people like Cisco and NTT Data in North America, in the US has found, people want to use them more. People want to socialize what they found, and they spend time exploring data sets. They spend time checking their different theories. They're trying to understand what the data is telling them, and they do that in their own time. They're trying to work out what they should do next because they see some kind of threat or some kind of risk in the environment. And because of that, they're really popular. They have a real business impact. So their design has to be very focused, has to be very fluid, has to be very fun to use. When we introduce this concept of immediacy, we see that the requirements for the applications themselves become very different, because then we're focused on speed, on these cool words like democratization, on social networking within the business, about exploration, about a decision-making process that's very personal. And it's not just access to the very latest data that we're giving these people, it's also to historical knowledge that helps them temper those instinctive decisions. Now, someone called Peter Marshall, I don't know if you know him, wrote this article after one of our Druid summits a few years ago now. And I tried to summarize the different qualities of applications that have been written by people like Twitch and Airbnb and PayPal who use Druid. Go and have a look at that if you like. I hope it might help you think differently about the kinds of applications that people are giving to their customers and also giving to people inside their businesses to make decisions. So that's enough theory, right? I want to try and now talk about actual real use cases. In risk and fraud analytics, there's a need to really deep dive into things to find out what's going on. And you need to do that extremely quickly with the latest data, and you need to do it very confidently. If you have got a website or a mobile app and you have some kind of graph or visual or something in that, you're going to have a lot of end users. Concurrency is going to be extremely high. And you might be giving that to people outside your organization, maybe even to suppliers. So that means the interface you build has to be different than everybody else's. It has to be better. In network use cases, that definitely needs access to fresh data, but it's a slightly different problem in networking because there is tons of data. And this data has to be accessed quickly so that people and machines can act quickly. In clickstream use cases like video streaming or web analytics, quite often you need to do A/B testing. You need to explore your visitor data and understand what groups people belong to. You need to look at trends. And one of the computationally difficult things with clickstream data is high cardinality data. And behind the scenes, you need to have a database that's able to handle that data effectively so that you can tune your channels faster than your competitors are doing. Now, digital advertising, it is the market that everyone loves to hate. I hate pop-ups. Anyway. But unfortunately for us in IT, they do have a blessing, which is that they've created all of this technology for us to use in the first place. They're the ones who created the big data revolution. And this is the place where Apache Druid came from. It wasn't built because it was a research paper. Someone was having a think at Stanford or MIT about what they should do for the future of IT. Druid was written to solve a real business problem, and it was this business problem of immediacy. So an application that you're building for immediate intelligence on top of Druid has the capability of making that experience, of making that application highly personalized to that user, very interactive, very intuitive. And because it's popular, it has to be able to scale reliably with the number of users that you're going to give this thing to, not forgetting they'll become really popular. Citrix are users of Druid, and they said in a recent Druid talk, which is available on the Druid Summit videos, work is no longer a place. I love that quote. And I think all of us feel that at the moment, because as businesses are trying to adapt to the new normal, it's application features like this, like in the Citrix Tetration application built on Druid, that it's enabling them to create knowledge societies, as they call it. It's a place where everyone participates in decision-making in business. And if you don't have these two things, it's not going to happen. Thirdly, you need to be able to ingest fresh data from data streams, because you need to get data in quickly. But you do also need to have the capability of tempering shall we say, people that overreact. You need to give them access to data that's historical so they can understand whether that threat really is a threat or whether it's just perfectly normal, thanks. Now, This is an application that we build at Imply. My relationship with Imply is that they pay my wages, and I work inside the team that is totally dedicated to the Apache Druid community. We work with the community, getting them to involve, to help one another, to write articles, to update the docs, all sorts of a community activity. So I'm showing you this today, not because I'm trying to sell you Pivot, but because I want you to see what an immediate intelligence application looks like. And this is the one that we build. It's meant to be fun. It's meant to have immediacy built in its foundations. It doesn't make sense for Imply to use any other kind of database because we're all about immediacy and immediate access to the data. But out there in the community, people are using Apache Druid are plugging in other applications. So for decision-making in the business, maybe you might plug in Looker or Metabase or Apache Superset, which is an open source BI tool. You might use anything really that can connect over a JDBC driver, which is actually Avatica. Some other people go and they build their own user interfaces. So they're just using the SQL interface like any database has, and then they're crafting their own user interface on the top of it. People in data science are plugging into Druid whenever they need to have extremely fast time-based aggregations to do things. So that's why Yahoo have built Yahoo Sherlock. That's used for anomaly detection in data. It's very good in data centers, for example, and Facebook Profit for predictive analytics. I wanted to then show you what some of these applications look like other than the one at Imply. So this is one that Game Analytics have built. So Game Analytics take lots of data from the mobile phone games that we're all playing all the time. And they kind of have a service for 8 or 9 different game platform development environments. They provide like a centralized user interface, lots of data going into this, but it's extremely flexible. So people can change to a different time period. They can filter the events by like how many coins people have spent. And the game developer themselves can then make a decision about what they tune next. What do they do differently next inside their application? And they're offering this as a service to their end users. This is from the Central Bank of Turkey. So the Central Bank of Turkey have got this flow of data about all the trading that's going on in the banking market. So it's all about risk and liquidity. And on the front end, they have Apache Superset to give them the ability to just play around with visuals. They can slice and dice the data in any way that they want to. This is from South Korea Telecom, who are Apache Druid users. So these guys are monitoring traffic on the mobile network. And I mean, the amount of data is insane. I sometimes have to check myself when I say, oh yeah, 2 billion events a week. That's nothing. But they're able to graph this data and understand how data is traversing the network and what they should recharge to other mobile phone providers. But notice here at the top where they've got this really cool like filtering bit at the top. So an end user of SK Telecom service can just filter and do whatever they like. And behind the scenes, there's no pre-computation. It's all instant. MoPub is Twitter's advertising exchange. If anybody puts any adverts onto Twitter, you do campaigns through Twitter. This is the interface that the advertisers are using and also the publishers are using on that platform. Again, it's very, very intuitive. It's all about dragging and dropping, about making things look really cool and very easy to use. InnoWatts are a company who deal with energy. And I love their quote. Their quote is, "Power is money." That what they're trying to do is give these huge power producers and power consumers the ability to look at very quickly how much energy is being consumed and what price they're paying for that money, so they can very quickly make a decision about whether they should change their buying strategy. If you're working in any way in kind of data infrastructure or in data centers, you might be familiar with Cisco Tetration. What this is doing is giving users of Cisco Tetration's services the ability to slice and dice and understand configuration changes and how that might impact on things. And these are all, again, very, very fast, very fluid user interfaces. So now I've given you an overview of what those interfaces are like. Where did Druid come from? So in 2012, it was a company that was working with advertising exchanges, and they open sourced the database that we're using. If you're not familiar with advertising exchanges, they're a place where publishers will say, hey, I've got this gap on my front page. how much do you want to pay for it? And it's extremely competitive with stick men. So the people who want to put their adverts on there, like their campaign managers, have to go through a bidding process in order to get to the top, above the fold on the front page of some kind of newspaper or some kind of online presence. So this company didn't want to do what everyone else was doing. They wanted to give people insights immediately. They wanted to give people the fastest access they possibly could, but do it through a user interface that made them different to all of their competitors, and that had a user interface that was personalized and distinguished them in the market. Now, they tried to use relational databases. They tried to use something called Greenplum with Postgres, if anybody knows what that is. Then they found that was going to cost too much. So then they decided to use data lakes, this newfangled thing called Hadoop, which, if you don't know, is a yellow elephant. And they ran all these jobs on the top of this database. They would run overnight, and then in the next day, you'd have all this data, and they'd just present that onto their user interface. It went okay for a while until someone said, oh, maybe we should add another database dimension to this query. And then the queries, instead of taking 12 hours to run, took 24 hours to run. This happens a lot. We get people who come to Druid because of cardinality explosion in their data. These kind of jobs can't keep up with producing what's necessary for a fast and fluid interface. They tried data warehouses, and they discovered they couldn't get data in real time. And people who are working with Druid will then say, it's so expensive to scale these data warehouses up anyway, we have to try and find an alternative, and so on. There is a huge amount of work that they did. They published their findings in the Apache Druid white paper, which you can go and read. If you are technical, I mean, it's extremely technical, but if you are technical, do go and have a read of that white paper. It's just an interesting read anyway about how data technologies work and how they've moved on. So what that meant was that this user interface was going to be really unscalable, that the data that were going to present in it was very disjointed, that what they could do for the end user was extremely limiting. And then I say it has this kind of like distance of speed between the data being produced and the decision makers and the end users sat at their desk. So because it's Silicon Valley, they woke up and they said, should we just build a new database? And they went, yes, okay, we will. So they built Druid. It later became Apache Druid. And what Druid does is it breaks up its data into time periods. It then columnarizes that data. It localizes that data, and it indexes it, and it compresses it. And then the engine does extremely highly parallelized analytical operations on it. And because it was built in the era of cloud already, it means that all of those different capabilities are independently scalable. If I have more data coming in one week, I just scale the ingestion capability and scale it back down again. If I want to store more data, I just increase the storage capacity and then scale it back down again. And resilience and high availability is just natural because that's what the cloud requires. So they built this end user interface, and it looks quite old now, but they built this end user interface so that people could get at the data about what their impression rates were, what their click-through rates were, really, really quickly. And they became very successful and got bought by Snapchat. So that's cool. If you want to know more about that story, there's a gentleman called Eric Cheddar. We call him Cheddar in the community. Still not really very sure why, but we call him Cheddar. He's our field CTO at Imply. Actually, there was an interview with Software Engineering Daily with him recently. Do just go and have a listen to that. And this is the Druid white paper I'm mentioning. If you just go to the druid.apache.org website, you'll find the paper listed in there. So very exciting, but it doesn't matter if no one looks at you. Well, for Druid, one of the first people that looked at Druid was Netflix, which is cool, in about 2013. By 2015, we had eBay, PayPal, Cisco, and Yahoo pick it up. You kind of get the story. Everyone loved it. We have people who are using it for video streaming analytics, people who are using it for infrastructure monitoring, clickstream analytics, for monitoring the health of APIs. And it's all built by and supported by an open source community. And we all live by the principles of the Apache way. And I know this slide's quite detailed, but I love this slide because it says, look how successful open source communities are. When I joined Imply and started working with Apache Druid, in about 2018, they completely rewrote the ingestion capability of Druid. They made it more scalable, they made it faster. In 2019, everyone was going, yes, but you can't do joins. So they sorted that out as a community. In 019, they added this really cool data science technique that blows my mind, but because of vectorization in 019. It's very, very active. It's a wonderful example of how Apache open source projects can really succeed. There's people from Confluent, from Target in the US, from Netflix, from Adobe, who are all making contributions to this database, companies big and small. One of those is Yahoo. This a quote is from the gentleman called Tim Tully, who was the vice president of engineering. Now, I show this because there's three things that I want to pull out of this slide. First of all, Druid is good for OLAP style processing. It's good for analytics. It means that if I want to do analytics on particular time periods, like monthly statistics, weekly statistics, daily statistics, if I want to do comparisons over different time periods, it's extremely fast. Secondly, that speed is all about things being done on the fly. In a data pipeline where you've got Druid as a database in the background, you don't do pre-calculation of things. There's no cube that you go and create. It's all done rapidly inside the parallelized data processing that happens in Druid. So it means you can make user interfaces that are very fast, they're very responsive, and you get rid of the overhead of looking after ETL jobs. Finally, of course, they say billions and billions of events. Well, not all of us have billions and billions of events today. So you'll be glad to know that Druid is linearly scalable. You can run it on a bunch of Raspberry Pis, which is what I've got down here. I've got 5 Raspberry Pis running Druid. Or you can scale it up to, I think the latest number was 7,500 nodes on AWS. It's a scary number. So I can scale Druid in and out. I can bring in real-time data in batches. I can do on-demand aggregations. I can do really fast ingestion. Brilliant. The true innovation of Druid, Eric Schetter says, is that it didn't reinvent the wheel. What Druid really did is it took everything that we all know and have known for 25 years, and it's applied it and turned those technologies and those learnings towards end users. So, for example, with log search systems, they took the need to have real-time ingestion, to have flexible schemas. With time series databases, they learned that they needed to treat time as a primary dimension. So we have time-based functions, time-based storage. And when it came to columnarized databases, they learned that we need to store the data effectively, that we need to enable people to do analytics extremely quickly. And they also learned how to distribute data very well. So you end up with a database that scales to many millions of events per second if you need it to. The query engine gives aggregation results at sub-second speed. We're talking the hundreds of milliseconds. And the storage system is very computationally efficient, which is lovely. But why does that matter? So I'm going to take you back in time to when I used to work at the Kensington and Chelsea Tenant Management Organisation in London, my very first job. And what Peter Marshall used to do was run an Oracle 7 database on a very, very large metal box in a server room somewhere that had NUMA Q memory architecture. Mind blown. And at that time, we used to put all of our orders, all of our customers, all our suppliers, everything used to sit in that Oracle database. We ran all of our reports and analytics on it. It didn't really matter because there wasn't that much data in it. But then someone said, I think we should really transform in a highly digital way. So they created this thing called digital transformation. And then, unfortunately, that meant that data could have had this weird habit of accumulating unnecessarily. And people then started to ask questions they'd never asked before. So we then had to rethink how we did this. So somebody said, with their very nice hat and coat on, why don't you go and build a thing called a data warehouse? And everyone said, that's a brilliant idea. I think we should create data warehouses. So then they went and bought products like Netetza and Teradata and Greenplum and Oracle and SQL Server, and Microsoft caught up and said, oh, I think we should do data warehouses. And what we effectively did was we split the data that runs the business from the data that gives us understanding about the business. And we learned a really important lesson. We learned that computationally, stuff that's about online transaction processing is different to stuff when it comes about analytics, online analytical processing. Between those two things, we had to create a job that puts the fear of God into quite a few of us. It's called an ETL job. And this ETL job is having to do the work of turning operational data into tactical and strategic data. Those jobs used to give me nightmares because they are extremely, you need to be very skilled to create them. You need to think about what data you're taking in. You need to cleanse it. You need to organize it. You need to put it into cubes in the right way. And then you have to go on maintaining those data sources. You end up with having to think like business people, which is no bad thing, but it takes a lot of learning and a lot of skill and a lot of time to do it. And as data accumulates and you have even more questions, essentially the whole service that you're offering starts to slow down. They become expensive to scale up. The ETL processes end up giving people nervous breakdowns. And eventually you end up back in square one again with a data service that just isn't very fast to look at. So now in the 1990s, someone said, wouldn't it be a really good idea if we split that off? Maybe we should do a knowledge ecosystem, or we should create analytical processing databases. So then we all went and bought things like Click and Cognos to give us more immediate access to the data. And they had cool things like wicked design elements with visuals we could play with and gauges. And you could design the dashboard yourself, even if the data underlying it was still only summarized, and even if that data only refreshed on an interval. And then someone created the internet. And then instead of scaling up our systems, we realized that what we need to do is scale out. And we shouldn't have one relational database. No one's doing that anymore. Now we've got to shard our data. So now we have new databases. Now this is the land that I stopped. At AB Agri, I stopped just before this, and all this was like magic to me. I had no idea that Couchbase was anything other than a place you went to go and buy sofas. But these are the kind of databases where we shard the data out, we split it according to customers or according to different regions in the world, and it all acts as one database. We have to scale our databases to internet scale. And what about the actual people doing the analytics? Well, now, while warehouses have data that's cleansed, packaged, and structured for easy consumption, says James Dixon, a data lake is now emerging. And this is more like a body of water in its natural state. Data streams in from source systems. It all goes into a lake. But to look at that data, especially at massive scale, you have to have new processing engines. So then we have some really cool other names that come in like Kylin and Trino and Hive. But it does give us an advantage because now we can look at data in its raw form. Those kind of ways of querying data aren't stuck in a rigid structure that you have if you just use ETL jobs all the time. But it does require a trained group of analysts who can explore the data in novel ways. And they don't just respond to business requests. They're also trying to build new user interfaces. And they can also teach machines to predict the future, which is really cool. But notice we still have to make the data statistically ready. We still have to do data cleansing. We still have to do enrichment. We still have to denormalize. We still have to sessionize the data. But instead of all that happening in ETL, we swapped some letters round and now we call it ELT. And you also have to hire people called data engineers. Now 2010 comes and goes, and the number and the type of source systems feeding data into data lakes and into databases goes insane. There's not just relational databases and servers sending data to the lake. There are highly distributed, know-nothing applications. There are mobile phones. There are medical appliances, solar panels, sensors in beehives. I mean, I remember being on a project where people were talking about putting sensors on the feet of cows. We can put individual rows now, though, into buses. We can put individual events into things like Kafka, Kinesis, Pulsar, Azure Event Hub, and we can do all sorts of magic on that data in real time. We can bifurcate the data, we can enrich the data, we can normalize it, we can cleanse it, we can do predictions, all sorts of really cool things. Now, as a data engineer in the background, This is a brilliant architecture. You can really scale up all of the databases. You can scale up all the data processing. You can have a lake the size of the universe if you've got enough money. And you can scale out all of these analytical engines that are giving you your machine learning, that are giving you your ability to query really flexibly, which is brilliant for everyone except the end user, because the end user is stuck. How do they get to all this data? How are they supposed to understand it? Are they supposed to go and get a data science degree? Some people, like the inventors of Druid, tried to solve that problem by adapting database technologies that they had to hand to store an optimized copy of their data. They used what are called key value databases like HBase and like Cassandra, all the while hoping and crossing their fingers that these jobs, like those 12-hour jobs that the creators of Druid came across, didn't just explode when someone asked them to divide their report up by country now, please. And it's those kind of things that meant we had to all relearn a really valuable lesson. And that is that OLTP databases that run our business are not the same as OLAP databases that are for understanding the business. Druid is that kind of OLAP database. It takes data, it understands the time period that that data spans, and it treats it, it optimizes it so that it's ready for immediate access on an end user experience. And it goes further than that. It doesn't just take data from data lakes and from databases and data warehouses. It also allows you to connect directly to the stream. So now you can take your data direct from the point of production and make it available to end users as well. Druid-powered user experiences have very fast statistical computation. They're used by lots of people. They allow ad hoc conversations to take place with data that is, after all, theirs in the first place. Everything about a Druid pipeline, everything about immediate intelligence applications are about speed. Now, there's this benchmark, hopefully it'll make sense to some of you, that basically says it's really, 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 really fast. And it is extremely fast. I do have to pinch myself sometimes about just how fast Druid is. But there's 4 technical reasons why that is. First of all, it employs compression across the board on a ton of different things. It creates indexes. Now, we know what indexes are. In the land of data lakes, though, indexes kind of are difficult to construct. They take time. You have to refresh them. It's all a bit of a pain in the backside. Druid does that for you. It also has inside its query engine lots of optimizations that mean that it will operate on compressed data wherever it can. It hardly ever touches the raw data. And finally, when queries execute, it's materializing the results. So the thing the actual end user wants to see, it does that right at the very end, because that's often very, very expensive. Now, the cost of this extraordinary is that Druid has to ingest data. It is a database. If you go to a data lake, you can just scan the data and you get your results back. People can go and look at whatever they like, whenever they like. But those jobs take time. Whereas with Druid, because it's read the data ahead of time, because it's partitioned it, because it's indexed it, because it's compressed it, it means that the results come back extremely quickly. So I can consume data in batches. Maybe I'll backfill my data. That's where we're talking about tempering the instinctive data, instinctive decision making. And I can connect to the streams directly. Other database engines don't ingest the data. They don't optimize it in the same way. So therefore, it's difficult for them to have the same level of performance. Instead, what we have in the kind of the slightly slower lane where we've got a ton more data, you can do other things that you don't need to do for a user experience like BT have. You can query things you haven't looked at before. You can federate data sources. You can use spot elasticity in the cloud. And nowadays, all of the databases you're going to see in the cloud, they're fault tolerant, they're elastic, they're shared nothing, they're highly available, all that really cool 99.999999% availability. It's all very cool. With Druid, you can scale it up just by adding more processes. You scale it down by turning them off. It self-balances, it self-heals. That's all really cool. All of these databases do this nowadays. But with query engines on data lakes, you can scale them up and use the new processing capacity almost immediately. Whereas with Druid, there's a little bit more work to do. It has to deal with the fact you're giving it more data. It has to localize it. And that's how it gets the extreme performance. Please go and have a look at the Powered By page for Druid. There's a ton of companies that you'll know who are using Druid. And to quote one of those members, Netflix, because I like talking about Netflix, they say, let Druid do Druid. Druid delivers extremely fast user applications that are fluid. They're full of fresh data. Lots of people can use them. But then when they've got other needs, like more traditional BI needs, they're using a different database. Stitch Fix is like a fashion retailer in the US. They also have exactly the same understanding of Druid. They're using Spark, if you know what Spark is, on their data lake to do the analytical tasks, where people are happy to wait an hour or a day. And then they have Presto for running queries that might take 30 minutes to run, where you're quite happy. You might do your end of quarter reports on that. Absolutely fine. But for any application where someone has to make a decision really quickly, or where it needs to be done very interactively, they use the Druid database. Where can you learn more? This is the Powered By page. There's 170 companies on there now. We've got everyone from Splunk to Swisscom to Zscaler to AppsFire, Outbrain, Twitter, tons of people on there. Someone you know will be on this list. And of course, there's many, many more who I can't talk about. And it's really annoying, but I can't tell you about some of them, but lots of really cool names. If you go onto this list and you see someone you're like, oh, they're working in a similar area to me, I wonder if I could get in contact with them. You can email me, community@imply.io. Someone in our team will be happy to tell you what they're doing. You can also find other examples. If you're already using some kind of data-based technology, especially cloud database technology, there's this tag browser. And this tag browser, you can click on something like Kafka, and it will give you loads of videos from community members where they are talking about how they're using Kafka with Druid or some other database technology. This is the Druid Project site. There's a quick start on this site. You can just hit the download button. And if you've got any Linux environment and you can spin up a Java runtime environment in it, you can just get running. That's exactly why I've got my Raspberry Pis, because I've installed Ubuntu, put JRE on it, and now I have Druid running. You can go through a process of ingesting data. And of course, in that, there's tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of docs. Here at Imply, we're all about the Apache way. So we are making contributions to the database as well, along with Netflix and Adobe. There's about 11,000 people involved in this work right now. If you know what forks are, there's 3,000 of them. Now, some of them are doing what I do, which is basically this doc has a typo in it. And the grammar doesn't read very well. So can we just update that doc, please? And I'll go in and I'll change the documentation and make it a bit clearer. But there are other people who are doing much more serious work, who are actually contributing to code. If you're in that ballpark and you want to get involved in building the database, there's tons of stuff for you to go and look at there. We also do interviews with companies and give them the opportunity to tell us what they're doing with Druid, what kind of applications they're running. Do go and have a look at that. It's our community blog on the Imply website. If you're using Druid and you'd like to be interviewed, or if you're tempted to use Druid from today and you want to talk to us about how to use it, then go there, make contact with us. There's also a training program which was launched just in November, at learn.imply.io. And if you go there, you can register for free, no charges, log in, go and spin up a Druid cluster. It'll talk you through how the processes actually work, what it does, completely free. Just sign in, go there. And there's also lots of meetups that are focused entirely on Druid. There's a link there to the Apache Druid meetup group right across the world. And lots of tweets you can read as well. And that's it. Thank you very much. I hope it was interesting for you.
Well, thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks.
I have to say, a lot of it was over my head, even though I studied computer science at university, and I remember the old days of ERDs and.
I used to love a good ERD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy doesn't know what that is.
Sorry, no. I think I'm sorry, but I just got stuck on the stickman. Great.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. I come from the designer side of things rather than the coding side. So yeah, brilliant stick men.
But you can appreciate a good dashboard though, can't you?
Did you like the gradients? That's the question.
Gradients and good clean interfaces. Yeah, I was only looking yesterday at Google Analytics, trying to work that out, and I can't believe what a mess that is in. If I'm allowed to say that out loud, but it's so confusing to use.
There goes our sponsorship from Google.
Yeah, well, never mind. At least they know now, don't they? Until they get it right. But no, that did look like a very slick interface.
Yeah,
cool. You've got questions?
I think we've got a few. Yeah, as I say, we've got a few questions. We've got, if you're looking at the chat, so we've had Liz asking, "What's next for Druid?"
There's actually a video on that. So currently, when you ingest data, it doesn't use an insert statement or create table statement at all. But there's work on that kind of front so that it behaves a lot more like a database. Currently, if you have to ingest things as an API, you have to push the data to, and there's like a data builder you send things to. That's really, on the technical front, on the engineering front, the biggest thing that's being worked on. There's videos about that, about the Druid Summit. But from my perspective, it's making people aware of what Druid does and what the applications are that people are actually building with them, and trying to give people examples of what those interfaces look like and why they're different to what people are currently using. I mean, I feel like I spent a lot of time playing around with Tableau, making sure it looked pretty for people. And I've now moved into a world where it's like, oh, okay, that's great for this, but now I need to be thinking about how I make it available to tons of people in a really user-friendly way without there being a progress bar or a save button on it, which is a very different way of thinking about things. That's what personally is for me.
Okay.
Advocating, I think you call that advocating in a senior way. Yeah.
Yeah. So one question I've got is just kind of, to what extent is AI kind of a driving kind of force behind all this instant data, all this live data?
So my feeling is that how can I put this delicately? So AI has taken us to a certain level, right? And it's taken us to a point where I was at a summit a couple of years ago, and the concern was that AI is kind of not being let rampant. That's the wrong word to say. It's not rampant, but it should be used as an indicator for things. It should be like, what should we do next? So when people are using applications built on Druid, which is really what I can talk about, they've still got AI in there somewhere. So there's some machine that might be saying this transaction doesn't look right, or this network traffic doesn't look right. Is this a denial of service attack? But what they haven't got, they didn't have historically, Twitch have a good story with this, where they didn't really have the ability to understand whether it was a concern quickly enough, because the databases, the data warehouses had to update overnight. And you'd have to then wait. But you when you're taking stuff directly from a stream and you're putting it into a database that has an end user application where someone can go, oh, let me see right now if that's a problem, or it kicks off an alert to something, then that's where I'm seeing, which is why Yahoo have their stuff and why Facebook have their stuff on it as well. That's my very terrible roundabout response.
No, that's all good.
Good.
We've got a question from Richard Jonas in the chat. Can I buy? Oh, you can see it on the screen. Actually, it says me reading it out. So can I buy?
Yes, you
can I buy Druid as a
can.
service?
Yeah, you can. Yes, you can. You can do that. There are people who have services on all of the different clouds: AWS, GCP, Azure, and then there's people who can help you deploy it on premise as well. If you obviously, I'm going to say Imply is the best. Obviously, I am. But the community pages have a list of people who can help you do that. Yeah.
Cool. So, is there still a use case then for the old way?
Yeah, I think there definitely is.
Data?
Yeah. So I have a book. I have a book called The Chimp Paradox. If you haven't read it, but I absolutely love The Chimp Paradox. Because when I started working with Druid, I was aware, well, it actually wasn't Druid. It was more like the event streaming processor things. And everyone was like, let's give people the data straight away. Let's let them make their own decisions. and the psychology of human beings is not perfect. And there's like, you need to have not only the real-time data, you need to have the historical data, and you need to think about it. You need to, if you give me, I see this a lot. You get people who will give people the data they need to make the decision quickly. And that's what you put in front of them. And you allow them to slice and dice it in particular ways, especially if they're end user customers or you've got privacy information you need to be cautious about. But then you kind of then go on to uplift that and enrich it when it's a bit more reliable and it's settled down a bit, especially when you've got late arriving data or your data arrives out of order. You need to still have that. And on top of that data, you might still have the traditional tools. Traditional is a terrible word. The tools that we're all used to, where you can design a report that your director's going to be happy with looking at. And he doesn't want to slice and dice the data for the next hour trying to find the data he wants. He wants to open his email and go, yeah, thanks, my pie chart's better this month, isn't it? And then put it down again. So, yeah, there's definitely a case for that. And we get people who use both. You'll get people who are using Tableau, and they're using some kind of superset application on the top, or a Druid application or pivot. But you get the both things happen for sure.
Yeah. I've got any other questions? Oh yeah, there we go, Alan. So how does Druid compare to Elasticsearch?
Oh, okay. So I'm quite friendly with the Elastic people. I did talk with them. How can I put it? I
That wasn't you,
for Elastic.
Both of you with the stick men, was it?
No. Sorry, yeah. We both know that we have advantages and disadvantages with our database technologies. Where people have a switch from Elastic to Druid, there's another good Druid Summit talk about that, is when the speed and the flexibility, the aggregations that you're getting out of Elastic fall below the SLA. Or when you need to ingest tons of data extremely quickly and keep up with it. That's where people find issues with Elastic over Druid. Whereas, would you put a load of log data in raw format into Druid and then go and do lots and lots and lots of complicated text searches in it? Probably not. Because Druid is about analytics, it's not about text search. So there are banks, for example. So it's a bad example. Let's say a data operations center, and they have tons of errors coming in, like things that are happening on the network. If they want to know trends and they want to see a peak really, really quickly, that will come from Druid. And they've built this application on the front of it, or bought an application and put that on the front of it for immediate access to aggregated statistics. But if they want to go and search through 1 billion log entries for the last month, they're probably going to do that in Elastic.
Okay. Cool. Hopefully that's answered your question, Alan.
Thank you. I have to thank my boss for that one, actually. I can't take credit for that.
That's not all your own work, then?
No. I suppose I should have given credit or something.
Are there any other... Oh, we go.
Druid right WordPress application.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, it will. Yeah. No. I think it is doing very, very well. That's all I can say, really. It's doing extremely well. And I'm not just saying this politically either. The community that surrounds Druid gets a lot of very positive feedback from itself. The community really likes working with itself, if that makes sense. And I love being part of the community and meeting people. I'll go to Munich and meet someone, or I'll be on the internet and Zooming with someone, and we'll all know each other, and you get to know each other by name. And I just love that bit about it. And I've heard it's not so good necessarily in other projects. I say that. So that's the thing that concerns me. But yeah, are there people adopting it all the time? And is it advancing all the time? Yes, it is. Do I think it'll win? Yes, I do. But that's me.
I gather with so much open source people using it, your security's got to be on the ball.
It has, yeah. So the Log4j thing was really interesting. Luckily, the engineers that are on the the project committee, again, all know each other very well. And as soon as that was released, they had a patch released within a few hours. But prior to that, they'd also said, well, actually, if you do this, that, and the other, then you'll have a little bit of a loss in functionality, but you'll avoid the issue. And the conversations are still going on about what they should do next about that log4j problem, what they should do to patch it, etc., etc. But they're also quite clever in that. So, and it's actually just embedded in the Apache way guidance that you must have a security bit to your build process. You have to do the analysis. And we also get feedback from the community about when people do vulnerability scans or when they do penetration testing, and they'll just come in the channel and say, hey, we've had a Qualys scan, and the Qualys scan says you're using this component which is out of date. But the community itself has to be active. It has to react to it quickly, and of course be free to react to it quickly and to make the contributions. I'm glad to say in Druid it has been like that, especially proven by the log4j thing. But yeah, it's for everybody is a bit of an issue.
I think that's a benefit of having a community-based project then, because there's always going to be someone on hand to sort it out. You know, when the opening hours, you all got the same passion and interest.
Yeah,
so you're all contributing to fix it.
I mean, so I was in a land where you bought everything from Microsoft, and the patches came from Microsoft, and if there was a problem, you'd report it in a ticket. And I have found the switch to open source quite difficult. Not difficult. It's a just switch in mindset, because you're not raising it. There is no one to raise a ticket to. There isn't a ticketing system. You have to go in and say, I think I've got this issue. And then you describe the issue, and then someone will jump in from Shanghai and say, can you go and do this? And then it gets developed that way as a group of people, as a commune. And it is quite a shift. It's a weird thing. Yeah, it's nice, though.
I bet.
Well, thank you, Facebook. Peter.
That's good. Getting fans already.
It's a good job that it said Facebook user, not Peter's mum. But
yeah. Oh no, I don't let my mum on Facebook. Oh my god, no.
Brilliant. Any more questions?
No, I don't think so. Not from this end.
Cool.
No. Have you got a closing slide at all, Peter? Have you got like a
no,
with your contact details on again?
So I was so excited to speak to you, and I didn't know what level to pitch it at, but I was like, you know, it's up the road. I'm basically waving at you. You're over there, and I just thought I'd love to be able to. It's great to be able to support a local technical community. So genuinely, if people want to reach out to me and talk to me about anything about how I ended up working in Silicon Valley, having worked in Innovation Way, then just reach out to me.
Yeah.
Did you? Oh my God, I said reach out. Send me an email. Yeah.
That's the so done thing. Reaching out.
Yeah.
We've got one more question from Alan.
Yeah, sorry, Andy.
He says, could Amazon start selling Druid as a service on AWS?
Yes, they could. Yeah. They may well do that. I'm trying to think whether I can say this. Yes, I can, if they weren't using it themselves. So there was a talk, I think earlier this year. No, it was earlier this year. Amazon themselves are using Druid to do analytics on their infrastructure. And yes, they could turn around and create it as a service. Yeah. That's the nature of open source.
No one's got a claim on it, I suppose.
No, that's it. Yeah. That's it.
I suppose it's whether it's kind of a profitable option for them at the moment if there's other competitors. And
that's right. And they have their own competing products. They have their own services that do similar, just like Azure do and just like Google have. Yeah. I think there is actually a version available on GCP already called something I can't remember. But yeah, they could do that.
Okay, probably a stupid question then. If it's open source and Amazon got their own version of it, what's to stop them from re-engineering your Druid code and then putting it in their ad and then saying it's theirs, I don't think?
So yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to say something like licensing. I mean, I think this is where the fallout was with Elastic, and Elastic fell on the wrong side of the hedge. So people were going to buy Elasticsearch, and then they were worried that Amazon were going to take their own version, and the community wasn't very happy with the decision they made and the licensing model change they had. I've certainly not heard any discussion of the Druid Project Committee changing the licensing model for Druid, which means that, yeah, that's one of the things that might happen. That they have to fork the repository. Lots of people fork the repository, create their own version. SK Telecom have done it. Yeah. What you want is people to contribute back. That's the key thing. You want people to contribute back. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Licensing.
Oh, thank you very much. Excellent.
Dan, you're on the ball.
You put me right on the spot then. That was a very complicated question I didn't feel qualified to answer.
No, I was just thinking out loud there. It's probably made no sense whatsoever.
Did you?
Yeah. Thanks all the same. Right, lovely. Thank you very much, Peter. Thanks for coming, and we'll be happy to have you back at future dates. Should you have another talk, by all means, come back.
Thank you.
Yeah, and obviously if we do kind of lean more towards the hybrid model of in-person and streamed kind of events, then you'll have to come along for a coffee and join us.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Back to face-to-face stuff rather than
coffee
Zoom
and
calls. And
that would be nice.
Yeah. The awkwardness of Zoom. God love
I
it.
look better on a camera, though, I think. I'm not sure in person. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you don't get filters in real life, do you?
No, that's right. No. It's called beer.
Yeah, that helps. Lovely. Thank you very much, Peter.
You're welcome. Thank you
again. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Big thank you for Dan in the background there, pushing the buttons from Big Orange Heart. All we ask is that you send out your tweets and sharing our tweets that we do to say thank you to Big Orange Heart and all our sponsors of DPiP, which are on our meetup page. And anything else to say?
Well, there's so Big Orange Heart are organising Wordfest live this year. So that is the 4th of March. So there's registrations are open now for that. I think Dan might have a link.
Yeah, there's a link at the top of the live chat.
There we go, wordfest.live.
Chat page.
So obviously anyone that's using WordPress as a user or building solutions with WordPress, it's always been a really good event. Head over to there and get your name down. And
we'll also get Peter to share his links that he's used. He's mentioned in his slideshow.
Yeah, we'll get those shared with everyone. We're going to head over to the social chat now. So if everyone wants to start a table or we'll all kind of gather around.
You'll see social at the top of your web browser.
Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Jonathan. We'll see you in a bit. Thank you, Dan. See you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
And thanks for watching, everyone. And we'll catch you next DPiP. Thanks a lot.
See you later.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.